Hello, people. This is the second part of the response to Socrates Son embarrassed and taught basic philosophy. Okay, let's see. Arguments. So what I am doing, being
So you're saying you're not doing an internal critique then?
sir, this is exactly what I'm saying. This is exactly my point. My point
You're
is
not doing an internal critique. We agree.
So now my question to you, sir, is please explain how God breaks this paradox without applying your theological definitions. Give me real reasons why. What is
No, we're not going to do that. We're waiting for you to give us the reasons. We're waiting for you to back up your claim because you made a claim. But I think it's clear to me.
The special pleading logical fallacy, and you just demonstrated that. You just
listen, Socrates. I know. Just because you're Greek, you think you know philosophy, and you're Socrates' son. But the honest reality is, you've completely face planted here, and you look really stupid, my friend.
First of all, I made the initial question. So you obfuscated Jake. Secondly, is your argument the contingency argument, Jake? He pretends that the contingency argument must be disproven. No, you must prove the contingency argument. Thirdly, I already gave you a reason. I said consciousness. Okay, so that's for your criticism. Now, could Allah have been any other way? That was my initial question. Is Allah truly probable to be the necessary being in a cosmological investigation? Or you just apply your abstract theological descriptions to falsely imply a cosmological probability? First of all, is this a stupid objection, like Jake the Muslim Metaphysician claims? No, you are stupid if you don't understand that this objection is a fair objection.
Can you show in a similar way that the argument of the Grim Reaper paradox can be fashioned in such a way to apply to an eternal conscious being such as God?
Let's forget that I already did that with my consciousness example. Okay, let's forget that. Even though you did a straw man, my argument was in fact a necessary being is something that cannot fail to exist and inevitable. So God's complexity that his qualities and character imply could fail to exist and are not inevitable in any cosmological probability. Noting the special pleading logical fallacy when assuming God's theological definitions presented as cosmological realities. That was my argument, Jake. So now let's return to your characterizations.
Listen, Socrates, I know just because you're Greek, you think you know philosophy and you're Socrates' son. But the honest reality is you've completely face planted here, and you look really stupid, my friend.
So first, you avoid my initial question. Okay, you didn't answer my question. I began the question. Then you straw man my argument. You pretended my argument is something else, when in fact you miss the point completely that my argument is exactly not applying your theological definitions. Yet you imply your theological definitions. You say that I didn't answer something that I answered, and then you pretended that the contingency argument is my argument, and I need to disprove it instead of you demonstrating a theist argument. Are you serious, my friend? In 5 levels, you were wrong. Anyway, let's continue.
Because we've given you numerous times over and over again to demonstrate an analogy between the causal finitism argument of the Grim Reaper paradox and apply it to God, and you haven't been able to do so. All you've been able to do is make the charge of special pleading without a demonstration of such. So again, still at this point, you're wasting our time. But you know what? Keep going. Let's see how far this goes. Keep going.
I said that in a secular investigation of God, the cosmological probability for him to be the necessary being is very low. That is what I said. And before that, I made the special pleading charge because you apply theological descriptions of God to imply cosmological probability. You admit that you apply your theological descriptions to imply cosmological probability. You already admitted that, Jake. So let's test whether that is special pleading. Let's take one banana. I say this is a super banana. It existed forever. It could not have been any other way. It's a necessary banana. It's all-powerful. It's an inevitable banana. It was inevitably there. So, obviously, this banana made the universe. Okay, can you understand now? My description, my abstract descriptions of the banana play zero role in a cosmological sense. Okay? Okay, Jake. So, you obviously, as long as you already admitted that you apply your theological descriptions in a cosmological argument, obviously you are doing the special pleading logical fallacy. Jake. So, let's continue.
But you know what? Keep going. Let's see how far this goes. Keep going.
Yes, of course. Of course, I don't believe God breaks this paradox. So obviously, I won't give reasons how God breaks this paradox. I can give some reasons how, and I will in fact demonstrate now how a quantum environment or the simplest fundamental form is in fact the necessary being. And my argument will be.
So you're moving to a different argument. you're
No,
moving to a different point
do
because
you want me
you're
to
not.
prove that God
No,
is the
no,
necessary?
no. I want you to actually substantiate the claim that you've made because you made a very bold claim, but you have
My,
not been able to substantiate it. And now you're
my,
trying to move on to a different point
it is,
because you're unable to substantiate your claim. We're not doing that.
you want me to prove God, sir, but because
No,
my
no, no,
claim
no, no. You're
is
saying,
special.
how does God break the paradox? God doesn't break the paradox. The paradox is irrelevant to the question of God.
What? The paradox is irrelevant to the question of God. So you admit the special pleading then. But, okay, Jake, let me one moment, my dear friend. Let me explain. You claim that God is in a special category that things you apply against the universe, arguments, in other words, against the universe, do not apply for God. That is the definition of special pleading in the dictionary, Jake.
As I said, we can believe in causal finitism for good reasons based on the argument apart from God existing. Now, if we add God into the mix, you need to show that there's some type of inconsistency with the belief in an eternal God and the argument of the Grim Reaper paradox. You have
Because I
not
already,
shown how there's an inconsistency.
if we apply your theological descriptions as dogma in a cosmological argument, then there is no inconsistency, Jake. But unfortunately for you, the contingency argument is a secular argument. Moreover, I already gave you an argument. I said consciousness, it is not probable to break the causal finities problem. Because, and I gave an example, first we act and then we think. So I already gave you an argument. You didn't address.
You need to show that there's some type of inconsistency with the belief in an eternal God and the argument of the Grim Reaper paradox. You have
Because I already,
not shown how there's an inconsistency.
okay, now let's go back and see whether I addressed this argument. Okay, sir. So my argument now is I say that radical consciousness is insanity, it's not consciousness. In other words, consciousness that doesn't apply to some kind of linear time environment, it's insanity. Can you imagine having what, consciousness that doesn't apply to time and causality? It's insanity. First I act, then I decide I want to say one word, but I think another word. So consciousness doesn't make sense in a causality environment in a non-time environment. Yet, I did address this argument. So why are you swollen our balls? You didn't address this argument. Oh, you never made an argument. Yes, I did make an argument. I said about radical consciousness. Consciousness doesn't make sense without an environment. I said consciousness is applies to causality. I made all these arguments. The arguments you didn't respond, Jake. And it even goes worse than that, guys. Look, the contingency argument is a cosmological argument. So it refers to real things. So when you say infinite regress, you are applying to cosmological things. And you make good arguments, like the Grim Reaper argument, for example. Okay, so that is cosmology. And suddenly, when it comes to God, we jump to ontology, and even worse, we apply theological definitions that don't even address philosophy. We just apply like a special pleading, like a magic card. When in fact, if you think it logically, for example, the Islamic God could have been eternal times, something different. It's not inevitable in any secular logic. So, how did I use the Grim Reaper example, Jake? Okay. Did I use that to show that your theological definition of God cannot break causal finitism, as you claim? No. I did that to show the contingency argument is applied like a cosmological argument. This is what I did. Was my argument, your theological definition of God cannot break causal finitism, as you claim? No. My argument was, in fact, you cannot apply your theological definitions in a cosmological argument. So, when you are an idiot, Jake, and you don't care about essence, and you focus on grammar, and you are wasting everyone's time, now making me, instead of going forward with my argument, making me go back, now wasting time, going back to show your grammar mistakes. Why you are doing that, my friend? There is no inconsistency. Okay,
there is no inconsistency. That's the point, which you made the claim that there was.
But let me continue. There is no inconsistency if you apply your theological definitions, which are irrelevant. I don't know.
How is it irrelevant? How is it irrelevant?
Because
you made the claim. You made the claim that God's existence, actually is in conflict with the Grim Reaper paradox. You have not been able to show that.
Yet, I gave the reason of consciousness. In fact, my friend, first of all, that was not my argument. So, okay, I just gave this example to demonstrate that the contingency argument is a cosmological argument. So I just gave an example that was not my argument, first of all, initially. You then pressed me to address this argument, first of all. Secondly, you are presenting the contingency argument, which is a theist argument, like it's my burden to disprove it. And not only that, it's my burden to disprove it in an absolute sense. This guy doesn't even accept reasons. He wants conclusive refutations. Because that.
So one second, sorry, Socrates. So are you saying that you think that the standards that we apply to the universe or the cosmos should be applied to this entity that's called God, but then when we ask what God is, right, in order to sort of understand the nature and see whether these standards are applicable, you say that doesn't matter. So there's just some label in your mind, some just abstract notion of what it is to be God, and you don't want to go into any detail about the metaphysics of what that is, what it implies, and all that stuff in order to see whether your objection applies. It's not a serious objection then.
Metaphysics, the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, identity, time, and space. They would regard the question of the initial conditions for the universe as belonging to the realm of metaphysics or religion. Apply as much metaphysics or religious definitions as you like. Okay, as long as you give secular logic and evidence why these apply, not insert them like dogma. That's why I asked, could Allah have been any other way? This was my question. How they answer this question? They say, no, Allah could not have been any other way because he is in a special category of things that could not have been any other way. This is how they reply to this question. In other words, they don't address real cosmological probabilities. They just say God is in a special category. That's special pleading. Simple.
So there's just some label in your mind, some just abstract notion of what it is to be God, and you don't want to go into any detail about like the metaphysics of what that is, what it implies, and all that stuff in order to see whether your objection applies. It's not a serious objection then.
Investigating the cosmological probability of God is not the same as inserting the theological description of God. The mere fact that you don't understand this difference and you talk like there is no difference, okay, demonstrates once again your special pleading fallacy. I am addressing the contingency argument. In this context, theology and metaphysics must be demonstrated in a cosmological sense. Just because you can conceptualize things, that doesn't mean they apply in reality. And I express that in this conversation, being again right. So, for the historical truth, in this debate, in essence, they didn't win a single argument. Simply because I was right and they were wrong in all points, all points. They won the impressions and the rhetoric part, okay? So, this kind of arguments go something like this. Look how difficult it is to find a natural explanation for the universe, therefore God. These are those arguments. That is, of course, God of the gaps and special pleading. But instead of just rejecting these arguments for the mere fact that you failed to demonstrate them, I'm willing to investigate. And I say, okay, metaphysics and religion, fair enough. Demonstrate the cosmological dynamic of this actually being true. In order for no one to have any delusions that what I was saying is true, let's see an argument. Okay, because I have seen all their videos. That's the thing. That I have seen all their videos and I know their arguments. Okay. It doesn't show in the conversation, but I have at the back of my mind, I know the arguments they make. So I know what I'm saying is true. So, but let's see a video they make saying whether God's existence is rational. And you will see exactly what I'm describing. Let's see.
The first premise is, to me, somewhat obvious that whatever exists begins to exist has a cause. Now, typically, atheists will respond will say, well, what about God? Well, they kind of missed the point in the premise that says whatever begins to exist. Yep. Now, our understanding of God is that he's eternal. So he doesn't fall under the category of the first premise.
What's that? He doesn't fall in the category. This guy had the nerve to challenge me. My friend, everything I said was exactly true, my friend. Okay, but let's continue.
Because it's applying to things that begin to exist. It doesn't apply to eternal things.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's to me, it's just an obvious premise that we see in our everyday life, everything that we experience that has a beginning or begins to exist, there's some type of cause behind it. It doesn't just pop into existence from nothing out of nowhere.
Okay, Jake, now that we know that I was absolutely right and you are doing the special pleading logical fallacy, now you should answer the question you avoided to answer. Okay, which is, tell us whether Allah is probable, could not have been any other way. That is the question. So, if you want to continue to use the contingency argument, tell us how Allah is probable to always exist inevitably as a brute fact and could not have been any other way. When in fact, as I said in the conversation, which you claim I didn't say, when in fact he is complex, when in fact he is conscious, when in fact he's got specific character qualities, how is that a brute fact? So,
Is there something about the way the word God sounds that
yes,
makes it just automatically? I mean, what?
I understand your point, and you made a good point, because and now you say that we can have some kind of epistemical, to weight epistemical value. For example, you can give other arguments for the existence of God, and therefore say that God exists with this kind of properties, and therefore, for other reasons, and now that God exists, therefore, now I can apply this definition of God to the contingency argument. But now you are broadening the scope, so I can.
Okay, but look, if we stick to then don't. If you don't want to go to God, don't go to God. But if you're gonna go to God, then we reach there somehow. Maybe it's from within the argument, the contingency argument. We made a stage 2, and made some kind of inference to God, and then we spoke about God's nature. Those discussions are going to be important to know whether or not we're doing a special pleading fallacy.
Okay, Abdul, let's take your challenge. Let's go to the stage 2 of your arguments and see whether those are special pleading. Because I have seen these arguments, that I know the context in the back of my head. Okay, so let's go and see how you justify the second part of the contingency argument. First of all, what's the second part? The first part is demonstrate the need for a necessary being, and the second part is demonstrate this necessary being is God. Now, let's see how you demonstrate this necessary being is God. Let's go to your relevant video and see how, from a necessary being, you go to God.
Necessary being, what are the sort of properties that it has? What are the sort of properties that it wouldn't have? And by analyzing the properties of this necessary being, this is sort of what's called stage 2 cosmological arguments, where we can try to say a little bit more about this necessary being or cause and see whether or not it matches up with, typically the attributes of God, or what we would conceive of as God, or is it more something that's, and I know Abdul doesn't necessarily like this word natural, but is it something that is purely natural and can be explained by natural means? Or is it something more akin to what theists mean by God, which is what we think and what we're going to be arguing for today?
So, Jake, to save some time, I don't even need to go and see your arguments. In fact, I will go because you demonstrate your errors more clearly after. But according to what you just said, Jake, how you investigate and engage with a stage 2 of the contingency argument. As you just described, Jake, you define the necessary properties of a necessary being and then compare them with your theological definition of God, as you just admitted, Jake. So, was I right? Jake, was I right? Yes, I was right, Jake. Abdul, was I right, Abdul? Yes, I was totally right, Abdul. You are not making a cosmological investigation whether God's properties actually have a cosmological probability to be the necessary being. You just insert your theological descriptions. Okay, I was right completely. Okay, now before we will see further your errors, let's see what people, because people were sending me messages left and right that I embarrassed myself. Let's see a good friend of mine, what he was saying. Dude, I just saw that video. In that video, you were actually terrible. If I have to be honest, many times they corrected you and you were like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Well, how about this? Even though I don't agree with the Muslims, they are way more coherent than you were. Okay, so, my dear friend, you were deceived in quote marks from rhetoric. I was totally right, 100%. Okay.
Yeah, so when you come across something that's contingent, in essence, what we're saying is that that thing requires an explanation as to why it is that particular way and why it exists. So I think I gave the example last time of a red triangle. So if you've got a red triangle, by the fact that it has three sides is necessary for a triangle, because triangles have three sides. But the fact that it's red as opposed to blue or green or yellow or any other color means that this is a contingent or possible thing or possible being.
Look now the total travesty of what they are doing. Exactly, my friend. That is exactly my criticism, my friend. Could Allah have been any other way? Or he is a brute fact, like a triangle? Allah is conscious. Allah has got specific character. Allah loves Muhammad. Allah has a sin. Allah can do everything. Allah thinks. All those are a brute fact. So we had nothing and then Allah with all these qualities, like a brute fact. No, Allah is the extreme end of improbability to be what you just described, if you are not doing the special pleading logical fallacy. Okay, so now I'm exposing the travesty of your logic. Travesty. Okay, that's not just an error, that's a logical travesty. Okay, if a triangle is red and therefore contingent because of its redness, imagine God who has eternal things more complicated than red. Okay. Okay, the contingency argument is dead. I buried this argument. How did I do that? By demonstrating that you are not investigating cosmological probabilities. You are inserting theological definitions to a secular argument, to a cosmological argument. This is how I buried the contingency argument. Okay, it's over. Now, in contrast to you, let's see how I investigate cosmological probabilities. Something is a necessary being when it not only exists, but could not possibly have failed to exist. That is what I am addressing. What you are addressing is necessary to explain what we see in the universe, because that fits your argument. This is how I present the probabilities of a necessary being. Okay, that's a graph I made months ago. Quantum environment, God. Pros, cons, pros, cons. I'm investigating cosmological probabilities. Okay, now let's see the characteristics we recognize in Allah and see whether that is probable to be a brute fact and be inevitably there. First of all, Allah is conscious. Consciousness is the end product of evolution. In our experience of consciousness in the universe is the characteristic of the most advanced and complicated evolved beings. The simpler is a being, the less conscious and intelligent it is. An amida, amibada, has less consciousness or no consciousness than highly evolved, complex biological beings, like a human. Moreover, the experience of consciousness we have in our universe, it's supported by complex brains, it reflects environments, and it's bounded by time and causality. So, how is consciousness a brute fact, Jake? Just exists, just consciousness on air. It's just nothing and consciousness just exists like magic. It doesn't make sense. Then, we know Allah can do everything and cannot be undermined by anything. How can something do everything? Allah can do eternal meters in 0 seconds, or let's say in 1 second. How can Allah can do everything? It obviously needs some kind of essence, no matter how counterintuitive is this essence, to support his endless qualities. Can nothing do everything? Is Allah nothing and can do everything? No, the same way you make arguments that a universe cannot come from nothing, the same exact logic is that God cannot do everything, at the same time not having any essence or any internal support for what he is doing. But qualities imply complexity, and you already admitted that you don't believe in divine simplicity. So, how come all this complexity, all this functional complexity, character, specific character, how all these specified things is a brute fact? How that come, Jake? How is this, all this functional complexity, Jake, is a brute fact and it's inevitably there forever? As the contingency implies. How that come? Okay, so God is in fact the extreme end of improbability to fit to the description of the contingency argument. And that is my argument, Jake. Now, you apply God like magic, like a get out of jail free card. And that is exactly your special pleading, Jake. The definition of special pleading. Okay, that is my argument. Let's say I'm wrong, Jake. Is that a stupid argument? No, it's a fair argument. So, no, I'm not the worst fear, don't know anything. Okay, all this conundrum is because you don't want to understand or to engage with my argument.